All right, one of the things on which both ACT and New Zealand First, but also the National Party identified with, is the proliferation of new staff, literally thousands of additional public servants or bureaucrats, and not just in central government, might I add, and also in local government in New Zealand over the last 6 years. David Seymour and the New Zealand First have both had a real go at the public sector, at its lack of both outcomes for the inputs, in other words, large amounts of staff, but dear Lord, look at health, look at education in particular. There's just two of the big social spending areas, and think for all the civil servants that are increased, did we actually see any increase in government service or turning around all the negative statistics? Probably on the answer of dispassionately, you'd have to say no. Then there's MB, for example, the Minister of Business Initiative and Enterprise, which grew its staff from 3,500 to 5,800 during that period of time. Ministry of Education, 2,500 to 4,400. Have we really actually seen an increase in educational standards, either at tertiary or at compulsory level? No. And then David Seymour also has given examples of the Film Commission, just a simple prosaic one. They quadrupled their staff, yet they still have the same amount of money to spend in terms of aiding and abetting the New Zealand film industry. But that has attracted some criticism, and not the least from Professor Jonathan Boston, who really has pioneered in many ways. In fact, I think he was the joint founder or the co-founder of the School of Public Policy at Victoria University, and has certainly acquired a significant reputation as Professor of Public Policy at the School of Government at Victoria University, and has been a member of, I don't know how many government expert working groups. But he joins us now to talk about whether or not, and that is the issue, reducing the public sector will work, whether it is going to lead to a diminution of government services, and what the rationale for those thoughts might be. He joins us now. Professor Boston, lovely to have you on again. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Michael.
Are you still...
I'll just say very sorry to hear that you've had COVID twice. That's no good.
Well, no. Listen, to be honest with you, mate, I had the flu, and out of the two, I'd take the flu any day. But that's just for me.
Okay.
What about yourself? Have you had it?
No, not that I'm aware of. Both my wife and I thus far have been, we think, COVID-free.
Oh, there you go. You must have been living a good and virtuous life.
I think it's luck, Michael, and bad luck.
I suspect you're right.
Anyway, now public sector.
First of all, just your you co-founded, as I remember. Now there was a lady. She was a professor as well. You too.
Not quite true, Michael. And I won't bore you with a long history, but the School of Government was formed in 2003, so two decades ago. Yeah. And I was a member of the School of Government, but I certainly wasn't the co-founder. The original head of school was Professor Gary Hawke, a very distinguished economic historian. Yep. Yeah. I subsequently became the deputy director and then director of the Institute of Policy Studies, and then the director of the Institute for Governance and Policy Studies, which was part of the school. And has been, at least until it was abolished, well, more or less abolished, a year or so ago.
Now, you have been critical in the last couple of days, Jonathan, of government or of centre-right government plans to reduce the number of public servants. Have I got that right?
Well, what I've tried to indicate, Michael, is that we have to be very careful about the kinds of performance measures we use in assessing, outcomes in the public sector area. So the first thing to say is much of the discussion I had with John Campbell on Q&A was focused very specifically on the public service, which is a small part, if you like, of the public sector. It's the, if you stand back from the particulars, we have round about 400,000 people working for the public sector, of whom around 62,000 on the latest count, as I understand it, were in the public service, which is the 40 or so government departments, departmental agencies and so on that form, if you like, what was previously called the core public service or the core public sector. Yeah. And my concern is that undue focus on the core is not necessarily helpful in the context where we're dealing with a much larger system of both government departments, but also Crown entities, and the Crown entities, state-owned enterprises and so on, comprise the overwhelming majority of the public sector. You're talking around, 340,000 staff compared with the core. And in both the National Party's manifesto and ACT's manifesto, there seems to have been, if you don't mind me saying, an undue focus on the core. So that's one issue. And we can change the numbers in the core extremely quickly. We could, for example, shift corrections or much of corrections into a Crown entity and take, say, 8,000 people out of the core. And that would make the core look rather less, quite bloated than it apparently seems to be at the moment. But that would do nothing in terms of the wider public sector.
Are you suggesting then that the growth in the number of public sector employees and the core since, say, 2017 is largely as a result of transference from other parts of the public service? Or is it because they have been recruited in addition?
Sure. So, no, Michael, I'm not necessarily suggesting that. But the boundaries here are rather fluid, and governments do make different decisions about what should be, quote, in the core and what should be in the wider public sector. And to be frank, some of those decisions are totally arbitrary. The second point to note is, and this is crucial, the population of the country has grown by about 400,000 in the last 6 years, a huge increase, about 10%, from 4.8 million to 5.2 million. The core public sector has grown perhaps 20-25% during that period, which is significantly faster, I admit, than the growth in the population as a whole. But then you have to acknowledge that the outgoing government has first of all had to face the pandemic, which we've just talked about in terms of COVID, and that required a significant additional recruitment of staff to do all manner of things. It's also wanted to make some significant changes in public policy, such as resource management reform, healthcare reforms, and so on. Governments that try and do sort of big shifts in policy, as you would know, Michael, invariably have to spend quite a lot doing that, and a lot of that expenditure goes on public servants, on contractors and consultants. If you have a government that doesn't want to do very much, well, then necessarily you're not going to need quite so many staff.